Anticipating death in our practice, anticipating death, anticipating the suffering involved in death are two complete different things. And it's anticipating the suffering is horrifying. Anticipating the fact that we are not eternal is completely different. Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining us in this next video of ours. We carry on today talking about the hindrances and the obstacles and the factors in our lives that can get in the way, can hinder our experience of well-being. Now, to those of you who are watching our videos for the first time, we have a series of videos on the structure of stress, and then we have a series of videos on the phases, on the origins, and then finally we work on well-being, and now we're working with the idea of what can hinder our well-being. So in the best interest and understanding of what we're talking here, it might be interesting if you can go back and watch the previous videos. It'll probably make more sense than maybe just this one. But anyway, you can start with this one and then you can go back and see the others. Today we're going to talk about a certain attitude of horror we have, aversion we have of ill-being, of suffering, of not being well. And you might find it funny, you might find it weird, put things in such a way, because who wants to suffer? Who wants to take ill? Who wants to die? No one. So what are we talking about when we talk of horror? Talking about a horror is talking about the impossibility of mentioning it. That is horror, when we want to avoid it at all cost. And when I say all cost, I mean all cost. And then many times in our lives and then in our health, we pay the full price for that, and it's not cheap. So we could carry on here talking about this idea and understanding that disliking the possibility is different to not banning it. There's a slight difference there, which is not so slight after all. We usually put things in a very linear way. Death is to be avoided, illness is to be avoided, and it's a good attitude. But we have to be very careful that these attitudes don't hinder us in living a better, a more profitable, a more gratifying life. One way or another, we do, to any degree, to some degree, all of us, we do try to avoid it, and we do try to postpone it for as long as we can. How can we deal then with this managing? How can we manage these things in a healthy or in a healthier way? I chose a few of the most common ones we see in clinical practice. Acting as a therapist, acting as a psychiatrist in my clinical work, it is very common that people, first of all, they can fantasize disease, illness, or death. So it is very common people deal with death and illness by fantasizing it. What does that mean? That means that they create a kind of a cosmic epic that might explain how the illness or death can come into their lives. What is it doing there? And they can find a larger explanation, which in many opportunities is relieving, definitely relieving. And in some cases, might be even edifying. People can, from these ideas, the cosmic epics they build for themselves, they can wind up doing very, very, very important and relevant things in their own lives and in the lives of others. Another way of doing it is fantasizing it, is trying to minimize the pain of departure. Now, see the paradox here. If you're living a healthy life, a life worthwhile being lived, then how can you not see some disappointment or some unpleasant end on the fact that it ends, it finishes, it might finish sometime. So you cannot enjoy, feast on your life, and not have a certain reservation, a certain distance, a certain some questions, some issues with the disease. So then we have we can try to minimize the pain of this departure, especially our own, but then as tough as our own, or maybe even tougher, the departure of some we love. No, so that is one of the most terrifying ideas about death, because let us say to some degree my own death I'm not going to witness, because I'm just going to stop my consciousness. I'm just going to stop my awareness. Who will burden the suffering will be those who remain. The burden of suffering is for those who watch me die, because they will see me stop breathing, or as it goes, like my dad. I saw my dad lie in a coffin with me. It was tough. It was very tough. So it's tough to witness, to presence the deceasing of those we love. And that is also something very hard. Why did I say horrifying? So these are the ways you can fantasize, and then you can romanticize them. You can romanticize them by reducing death or disease as a simple change of clothes. I've heard that. Say, no, you die and then you're born again, which is something we don't actually have any hardcore evidence to support, but you can believe it. It's no problem. That's why I say fantasizing or romanticizing, because it's something that does not find, let us say, a hard evidence, solid evidence in our present life experience, which doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It's just say it's unreachable. It's kind of untouchable. So we can put it in several ways. And some people say it's like dying and then being reborn. It's just like changing your clothes. No, unfortunately, it is, yes, but unfortunately, thinking in this linear way, in this shallow fashion, we jump all the other aspects of the transition from the living to the dead. It is tough, and then but we can use these just like changing clothes. No, it's like changing lives. It's like changing lives. It's way more rough, or better saying, more undermining or transforming than simply changing clothes. So we find other ways. Say, okay, it's just a glimpse, it's just a moment, then afterwards things are going to be so fantastic and so good for me. But it's really dealing with the unbeknownst. What really catches us in the idea of death, of disease, of illness, is the fact we don't know what it is like. They say, I know how it is to be ill, because I'm diabetic. Like me, myself, I have diabetes. But before I had diabetes, I didn't have the faintest idea what it felt like to be diabetic. Actually, it's much smoother than I imagined, really, because it's just keeping your diet in balance, keeping some exercise. And today we have some wonderful medications that help us in a defining way, and you can have a relatively normal life being diabetic. So sometimes you might be surprised that our expectation overwhelms the experience, especially taking ill, especially being sick in some moment of our life. But death is something we don't have the same safe, hardcore, physical evidence. If you like, putting it coherently with what we work here with psychological well-being and mindfulness, there is no bodily, there is no organic experience we can count on And that makes a difference. It's when our idea of a present moment is challenged. It's exactly that. Then, and finally, recalling also that the future is basically, essentially unknown. If you like, the future doesn't exist. So, me becoming sick, or me becoming ill, or me dying is something that does not exist in the present moment. The past exists in the shape of memories. The present moment in the shape of the continual re-edition and reorganization of these memories. Like we are talking here today, we are talking through a language, and this language was once learned, and it's in the past. And I use my memory of other talks I've present and I've seen and I have had with friends at school, at home, and I go at making them present, and I'm re-editing my memories. That's the present moment. Now, the future is 100% imaginary because we build it with imagination, because it doesn't actually exist. It's like a second universe. People say that there is a multiverse. You have several universes. I don't understand. I don't fathom a grain of that. But if they're saying, well, maybe there is such a thing, but then the other universe is completely unexistent in our personal human experience. What's the difference if there's one universe or millions of them? What changes for you in your imminent decision of leaving to work or stay a little longer at home? So there is this imaginary aspect of that, which is also really, really, really tough to stand. And then we try to predict. The third way it is very common to be seen in clinical practices, we try to predict the future, which again doesn't exist. But we try to predict it. We try to have a preview. We try to control it. A few decades ago, there was that story of cryoconservation. I don't know how that story ended. I think everyone who underwent it desisted. It was about freezing your body at a very low temperature, in the hope that in a close future someone would develop the technology to defreeze it, to defrost your body, and then you would come back to life. So people who had cancer, some people who were horrified about dying, they all chose that kind of thing. But I think all the families gave up, I believe. Apparently no way of defrosting the fellows was possible to have been achieved. All of these skills can help us support the idea of illness and death. And they are very important, each one of them in their own merit. But all of them may also have in turn an a reverse effect. They can also bring upon us more suffering than is already inherent to the fact, because then we start imagining, and when we imagine, we usually do a bad job of it. So the most important thing is maybe not trying to control it with our imagination, with our fantasizing, with our romanticizing. Just take it for the fact. It is a fact. It's unpleasant. It's not nice. Fortunately, it's an experience we go through very few times in our lives. We lose beloved people, not that commonly. Fortunately, it's not a routine deal. And our own will be one final experience which we haven't had so long. Then we can anticipate, we can realize, you may say, okay, but what's the difference after all? What can we separate? And when we talk about the suffering involved these things, we can separate the anticipation of death is different to the anticipation of the suffering involved in dying. Because actually, taking ill or dying is, I'm going to sound a little bit cynical here, but I want to run my risks. Dying is a relatively simple thing. Your organism stops working. And it's going to. Mine is going to. Possibly a little earlier because I'm diabetic. Full on. But anyway, anticipating death, having it in sight, is completely different to anticipating the suffering involved in taking ill or dying. The suffering I might experience by watching beloved ones die is not to be anticipated. You have no idea what it means. I mean, I had to lose my aunt. I had to lose my mom to really know what it is, what it was for me to lose my aunt and for me to lose my mom. And still, it can be completely different from an emotional and structural, logistic, cognitive aspect. It can be totally different to your experience when you lose or you've lost beloved ones. There is no guarantee whatsoever that I am going to react, I'm going to behave, I'm going to have this emotional and cognitive disposition. It's something, it's completely, again, unbeknownst. Anticipating death in our practice, anticipating death and anticipating the suffering involved in death are two complete different things. And it's this anticipating the suffering is horrifying. Then anticipating the fact that we are not eternal is completely different. It's completely more wise. It's wiser and it's more healthy. News, idea, or information about disease and death can pop up in our daily life because it's a favorite term. Here in Brazil, we are just going through, and very recently we had on our newscast the experience of a woman, a lady, who took a deceased relative on a wheelchair, trying to make him emulate him signing a loan in the bank. So it's actually what inspired me to bring this. And then the next one, when we take the image of this gentleman on a wheelchair and the lady tried to simulate him signing a paper. When you expect from the dead that which can only be achieved by the living. And that is a theme we are going to go within a few weeks' time, when we start talking about the clown and what the clown can teach us about our human experience and how what is tragic can be laughed at and what is laughable can be tragic. But that's for the next moment. For now, we're going to finish off talking then that these news, these ideas, these informations, these talks, these social net materials that pop up daily, they can be helpful or hazardous. But it all depends on our subjective attitude toward these two issues, disease and death. Again, I say that it is extremely important to understand that the two complete different experiences from a subjective point of view, two complete different experiences, anticipating the pain and the suffering involved in disease or death, and anticipating the possibility of coming ill or dying. Two different things, and in our practice, we can cultivate, we can nurture this difference, which can be extremely freeing, extremely liberating. So I hope this next video of ours, like the others, may help enhance your practice, may help enhance your insight, and with that, develop wisdom, and with wisdom, the possibility of living a better life. Thank you very much for your time. We'll be talking next week. Bye-bye.